Hey everyone, my name is Chase Smith. I'm the student pastor and worship leader at Grove City Vineyard in Grove City, Ohio, and I'm going to be bringing you the devotion today, and I'm so excited. Today we're going to talk about worship, and it's something that I love very dearly. Obviously, it's what I do at our church, but I just wanted to kind of have a discussion about what is worship, why we worship, and maybe how we worship. And I think it's important to kind of understand what worship is and the role it plays in our faith. So I just want to talk about that for a few moments. I want to start by kind of talking about what worship is. And this is a definition that I like for worship. Worship is our response to wonder. All right. Our response to wonder. And worship isn't restricted to God or music. All right. And that's kind of like the first thing I want to get to. In our response to worship, to wonder, worship isn't restricted to God or to music. Matthew 6:19, I printed it out here. I want to read it. And listen to how Jesus frames this on the Sermon on the Mount here in Matthew 6. It says this: "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin can destroy and where thieves can break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and vermin do not destroy, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Your heart will be also. Where your treasure is, what you value, what consumes you, what you obsess over, there your heart will be also. You can worship things other than God, not in music. Worship is our response to wonder, and it is not restricted to God or to music. You could worship video games. You could just be in awe or just be consumed or obsessed with video games. Maybe you're consumed or obsessed with some influencer or some YouTuber or TikToker, or maybe you really are trying to get all these likes or followers. That can consume you. Maybe some of you like just love to read or are just obsessed with sports. Our response to wonder isn't restricted to God, and it's more than music. It's not restricted to music. Here's another thing: worship isn't restricted to humans. The Bible speaks a lot of different places on how other things can worship. In Luke 19, Jesus says, if you don't worship, the rocks will cry out. So if we do not worship, then the rocks will cry out. Listen, in Psalms, it says the whole earth will cry out. And that's in Psalm 66. In Psalm 19, it talks about how the heavens will rejoice. And in Revelation 5, it says all creatures will worship. All creatures. So worship is not restricted to God. It's not restricted to music, and it's not restricted to humans. Everything can worship, which I think leads us to this next question. Well, why do we worship? Why do we worship? Isaiah 43 verse 7 says this: "Everyone who is called by my name, whom I created for glory, whom I formed and made." God made us to worship. It's kind of how we are, how God made us. We are made. We have this desire to worship something. Everyone worships something, and that's just kind of how God made us. Why do we worship? Worship helps others draw near to the Lord in worship. When you see someone else worshiping, it's almost inviting to join them in worship. It is encouraging to join them in worship, and it encourages you to join them in worship. And worship is never done to as a show or as a demonstration for others, but when you intimately and personally kind of find those moments with the Lord and enter into that secret place and you're in the zone, it is captivating, and it kind of does encourage other people to worship. And so why do we worship? We worship because that's how God made us. We worship to encourage and inspire others. And then personally, we worship to show humility, right? Acknowledging that God is better. Worship is more than our preference or our personal state or our emotion. Worship transcends emotions. Worship transcends good days and bad days. Worship transcends if you're really, really happy in a relationship, or if you just broke up and you're single and you're having a bad day. Worship transcends all of that. Worship transcends emotions and states. We look at the Bible, Acts 16, Paul and Silas, they're in jail and they're worshiping, right? Like, I don't know how happy you are in jail, but Paul and Silas worship in jail. Why do we worship? Because it transcends how we are. It transcends how good of a day we're having. It transcends how good of a week we're having, how good of a month we're having. Worship transcends all of that. Worship is telling God, hey, like where I'm at right now pales in comparison to how great you are. Whatever troubles I have right now, Lord, I know that you care and can take them. Worship transcends all of that. We worship because that's how God made us. Why do we worship? Because it acknowledges to God that he is better, his ways are better, and that we need him. And we worship because it helps others be drawn to the Lord. And there's a lot of ways to worship. I want to wrap this up with this final thing. How do we worship? So how do we worship? So what is worship? It's our response to wonder, and it can be more than music and two other things than God. Well, why we worship? Because God made us to worship, and God made us to worship him. Excuse me. So how do we worship? And there's a lot of ways to worship, and one of the most popular ways in a local church setting is to worship through song, which is hopefully what a lot of your churches do. They like to, hopefully a lot of churches like to worship through giving, whether it's tithes or giving to the community, giving of resources. That's a way to worship. We worship through the word, through reading of the Bible together, through hearing the word preached. We worship through responding to the word. We worship through fellowship. We worship through communion. There's a lot of ways to worship. And I just, as a worship pastor, I want to speak to maybe just a little bit about the musical side of things. N.T. Wright, he is an Anglican bishop over in the UK, and he has this awesome British accent, and when he talks, he sounds really smart, and he truly is brilliant. So if you haven't heard of N.T. Wright, I encourage you to go to YouTube, look up N.T. Wright. He's just incredible. This is what he says. When we use our bodies as instruments, whether we're singing, clapping, we are echoing with all that we are the meaning of these songs, which I think is a really, really cool way to word that. It doesn't matter how good of a singer you are or how badly you clap off beat. Let me tell you, as a worship leader, a lot of people clap off beat. It can be distracting. But whenever you do that and your whole body acts as an instrument, you are echoing with all of your meaning the songs that we're singing in church. And whether we're singing about God's love or God's faithfulness or God's salvation or whatever we're singing, we are echoing with all that we are these meaning of these songs. And so how do we worship? We just worship with our bodies. We worship in our response to wonder. And how do we worship? It's not to be done in a way that promotes self or your show. Matthew 15:8, Jesus speaks here pretty clearly that there are people who worship me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. And I know we just talked about worship can draw people in and can help people and show them how to worship, but that's never the heart of how we worship, right? Jesus, when he talks about how to pray, he says, go to a quiet place and pray. So no one hears you pray. No one sees you pray. This is like an intimate, like a very personal moment. And I think worship can be kind of that same way, this really safe, sacred space where you find with the Lord, where you can talk to the Lord, you can pray to the Lord, you can worship the Lord, you kind of rest in the Lord. And that could be a way to do that as well. Some people find that it's easiest to get lost that way in songs. There is this kind of like private worship and public worship mindset that maybe people find. And some of that, you kind of have to discover yourself, whether you are kind of figuring that out on a large scale service. If your church meets in a large scale service, like in a small student service, maybe people like to worship in their car, getting ready for school. You get the speaker on, you're brushing your teeth, you're worshiping. Maybe you find worship kind of like in your room when you shut the door and you can just really kind of like quiet yourself. There's really not a wrong way to connect with the Lord. I just want to encourage you to connect with the Lord. And sometimes a lot of people find that through music is a way to connect and express these feelings that we have, to declare these truths. What we believe can easily be done through song. Eugene Peterson, he wrote the Message. He translated the Bible to the Message and to kind of like our common language. This is what he says about worship, and I think this is great. He says this: worship does not satisfy our hunger for God, it whets our appetite. So worship doesn't satisfy our hunger for God. We shouldn't be like, yep, that's enough worship for today. No, worship should whet our appetite for the Lord. And I think that's a really great way to look at it. And I want to leave you guys with this. This is on Matthew 26, and we're talking about worship transcends our emotional states. How do we worship? It's this like private thing that maybe happens publicly. Our worship is in response to wonder, and God has made us to worship him. I think this encapsulates all of those kind of points in worship. And I want to leave you with this, and maybe this will encourage some of you. This is in Matthew 26. It's when Jesus is anointed at Bethany. And this passage isn't a song. This passage isn't someone kind of like going into their private place to worship, but it's someone's response to wonder. It transcends emotion, and it's this kind of like private response that happens publicly. Here we go, Matthew 26, a pure example of worship. Well, Jesus was in Bethany in the home of Simon the leper, which is a really cool sentence anyway. A woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste, they asked? This perfume could have been sold at a high price and money given to the poor. Aware of this, Jesus said to them, why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. This is the best thing that this woman had, and she brought it all to Jesus, and she offered it to Jesus. It wasn't in a song, and I think this is a great example of us. Some days when we have these opportunities to worship, we're tired, we're sad, we're lonely, we're upset, or we're happy and we're excited, and we just had a whatever we have, we bring to the Lord. And if we do that and do it faithfully and do it in honor of the Lord, God looks at that and says, this is what it's about. Whatever you have, wherever you're at, just to worship me. And some people it doesn't make sense. And sometimes that's all you have to give. And Jesus says here, like, that's okay. Right? I think of also not only this example, but the woman who gave like the penny or like the lowest form of money. Jesus says, no, like that offering, what she gave is worth infinitely more than anyone else. And there's this theme of whatever you have to give. If you give it to the Lord in worship, then the Lord is going to bless that and see that. And I think that's faith, right? I think that's pure worship is God. I might not have a lot to give. I might be exhausted. I might be upset. I might be angry at you. I might be struggling just in my prayer. I might be struggling in my faith. But God, here I am. I'm going to worship you. I'm going to worship in my response of wonder to you. I'm going to worship because, God, that's how you made me to worship. I'm going to worship because, God, you're worthy of our praise. I'm going to worship because, God, I want to bring you, even if it's not a lot, even if it's not good. God, I want to bring you all that I have. I hope this little discussion of worship is encouraging to you today, and maybe kind of sheds a different light or perspective on worship, that it is more than just music. It is more than clapping and singing. It's a part of it, but it's more than that. Hope you guys have an awesome week this week. Hope you guys are staying healthy and making good decisions. And I hope to be able to bring you another devotion sometime whenever I'm able to. So thank you for the opportunity, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.